The Los Angeles evening air was cool and crisp as the black SUV pulled up to the curb on Melrose Avenue. Inside the vehicle, Vin Diesel sat quietly in the back seat, his fingers drumming softly against his knee. He wasn't heading to a movie premiere or a fancy Hollywood party tonight. No cameras would be flashing, no fans would be screaming his name. Tonight was different. Tonight he just wanted to be a regular guy walking into a restaurant. Well, not just any restaurant. His restaurant. "You sure you don't want me to come in with you?" his driver asked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. Vin shook his head with a slight smile. "Nah, I'm good. Just gonna grab some dinner and see how things are running. I'll call you when I'm ready." The driver nodded, understanding. After working with Vin for years, he knew that sometimes the action star just needed to step away from the spotlight and experience life like everyone else. Vin pulled his black hoodie over his head and adjusted the baseball cap sitting low on his brow. He looked at himself briefly in the tinted window. The disguise wasn't much, but it usually did the trick. Most people weren't expecting to see a Hollywood celebrity casually walking down the street, so they simply didn't notice him. It was all about confidence and blending in. He stepped out of the SUV and took a deep breath. The street was busy with the usual evening crowd. Young couples walked hand in hand. Groups of friends laughed as they decided where to eat, and a street musician played guitar on the corner. This was the real Los Angeles, the one that existed beyond the red carpets and studio lots. Vin loved this restaurant more than most people knew. It wasn't just another business investment or a way to make money. This place had a soul. It had meaning. 2 years ago, when he first bought the property and started planning the concept, he kept thinking about his father. His old man had always talked about opening a restaurant someday. He'd sketch out ideas on napkins and describe the menu he'd create, the atmosphere he'd build, the people he'd welcome through the doors. But life had other plans, and his father never got the chance to make that dream real, so Vin did it for him. He wanted this restaurant to feel like home. Not the fancy Instagram-perfect kind of place where people came just to be seen. No, this was supposed to be somewhere genuine, somewhere families could celebrate birthdays, where first dates could turn into love stories, where friends could gather after a long week and just relax over good food and cold drinks. As Vin approached the entrance, he could see through the large windows that the place was packed. That made him smile. Every table seemed occupied, and servers moved gracefully between them, carrying trays of steaming plates. The warm glow from the Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling created an inviting atmosphere that spilled out onto the sidewalk. The building itself had character. Exposed brick walls, original wooden beams across the ceiling, and vintage photographs of old Los Angeles decorated the space. The open kitchen concept allowed diners to watch the chefs work their magic, flames leaping from pans as they prepared signature Italian dishes. Instead of walking through the main entrance where the hostess stand was positioned, Vin headed toward the side alley. There was a staff entrance there that led directly past the kitchen. He'd used it before during construction and renovation. Tonight it would help him slip in without causing a scene. The heavy metal door opened with a familiar creak. The sounds of the kitchen hit him immediately. The sizzle of food on grills, the rhythmic chopping of knives on cutting boards, the shouted communications between cooks coordinating orders. It was controlled chaos, the kind that happened every night in successful restaurants. A young line cook looked up from his station and did a double take when he saw Vin. His eyes went wide. But before he could say anything, Vin pressed a finger to his lips and gave him a wink. The cook grinned and nodded, understanding the need for discretion. He turned back to his work, though Vin noticed the guy was smiling a bit wider now. The head chef, a passionate man named Antonio who'd trained in Italy for 15 years, spotted Vin from across the kitchen. Antonio had been with the restaurant since day one, and Vin trusted him completely. The chef wiped his hands on his apron and walked over, speaking in a low voice. "Boss, you didn't tell me you were coming tonight," Antonio said, his Italian accent still thick despite decades in America. "That's kind of the point," Vin replied with a quiet laugh. "I want to see how everything runs when people think I'm not around. Real experience, you know?" Antonio nodded approvingly. "Smart, everything is good tonight. Saturday dinner rush, as you can see. The osso buco is flying out and we're almost out of the tiramisu already." "That's what I like to hear," Vin said, clapping the chef gently on the shoulder. I'm just gonna grab a corner table, order some food, and watch. Pretend I'm not here. Invisible boss, Antonio said with a knowing smile. I'll make sure the word stays in the kitchen, but you better try the special tonight. I'm doing a braised short rib that will change your life. You say that about everything you cook, Vin teased. Because it's always true, Antonio shot back with a grin before returning to his station. Vin moved through the swinging doors that separated the kitchen from the dining room. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. The harsh brightness and industrial sounds of the kitchen gave way to soft jazz music, warm lighting, and the pleasant murmur of conversation and laughter. He paused for just a moment, taking it all in. At one table, a young man was down on one knee, holding out a ring while his girlfriend covered her mouth in shock and joy. At another, a family of 6 was celebrating what looked like a grandmother's birthday, complete with a cake and off-key singing. Near the window, 2 business colleagues shared wine and discussed what seemed to be an important deal. Their papers spread across the table between their appetizers. This was exactly what Vin had envisioned. Real life happening in real time, people creating memories. He spotted an empty 2-top table in the far corner, partially hidden by a decorative wooden partition. Perfect. He could sit there, observe everything, and remain relatively unnoticed. As he made his way across the dining room, he kept his head slightly down, the bill of his cap helping to shadow his distinctive features. A few people glanced at him as he passed, but no one seemed to recognize him. One older woman did a slight double take, squinting like she thought she knew him from somewhere, but then turned back to her companion and continued her conversation. Vin smiled to himself. The disguise was working. He settled into his chair and looked around. From this angle, he had a good view of most of the dining room. He could see the bar area where a talented bartender was shaking cocktails with practiced flair, entertaining the customers sitting at the bar with jokes and stories. He could see the server station where waitstaff punched in orders and assembled trays. He could observe the flow of the room, how servers navigated between tables, how the hostess managed the waiting list, how everything worked together like a well-rehearsed dance. A server approached his table with a friendly smile, carrying menus and a water glass. She was probably in her mid-30s with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and the restaurant's signature black apron tied around her waist. "Good evening. Welcome in," she said warmly. "Can I start you off with something to drink besides water?" "Just water is fine for now, thanks," Vin said, keeping his voice casual and his head slightly turned. "Perfect. Take your time with the menu and I'll be back in just a few minutes to check on you." She placed the menu down and moved on to her next table. Efficient and friendly. Vin appreciated that about his staff. Antonio had been right to hire experienced people who knew how to make customers feel welcome without being overbearing. Vin opened the menu, though he knew it by heart. He'd approved every single dish, tasted every recipe, and even suggested modifications to a few items. But he liked looking at it anyway, seeing how it was presented, noticing which items had small notations indicating they were popular or chef recommendations. The menu featured classic Italian comfort food with elevated techniques. Handmade pasta dishes, slow-braised meats, fresh seafood, wood-fired pizzas with creative toppings. Everything was made from scratch daily. No shortcuts, no frozen ingredients, nothing from a can unless it was imported from Italy itself. As Vin scanned the appetizers, his attention was drawn to a sound coming from somewhere near the kitchen entrance. It was faint, almost lost beneath the ambient noise of the dining room, but something about it made him pause and listen more carefully. It sounded like someone was upset. A female voice speaking urgently but trying to keep quiet. The tone was strained, like someone fighting to hold themselves together. Vin lowered his menu slightly, his eyes scanning the room to locate the source of the voice. Years of action movies had given him pretty good situational awareness, even in real life. He spotted a young woman standing near the server station, partially hidden behind a decorative column. She had her back to the dining room and she was holding a cell phone to her ear. Even from a distance, Vin could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing around nervously, making sure no one was watching, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot like she was carrying an invisible burden. He couldn't make out the exact words yet, but the distress in her voice was unmistakable. Something was wrong, something serious. Vin felt his instincts kick in. The same instincts that made him protective of his family, his friends, his crew on movie sets. He'd always been the kind of person who noticed when someone was struggling, even when they tried to hide it. He set his menu down completely now, his full attention on the young server. The restaurant continued buzzing around him, completely unaware that anything was happening. But Vin was tuned in, listening, watching, and already starting to wonder what could make someone that upset while they were at work. The evening had just taken an unexpected turn. Vin had come here to observe his restaurant operating smoothly, to enjoy a quiet meal and feel connected to his father's memory. Instead, he was about to stumble into something that would change more than just his evening. He just didn't know it yet. Vin adjusted his position in the chair, angling himself slightly so he could better observe the young woman by the server station. She was still on the phone, her body language screaming stress even though she was trying to keep her voice down. Her free hand gripped the edge of the service counter so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The dining room remained oblivious to her distress. Around him, people continued eating, laughing, celebrating. A waiter passed by carrying a tray of desserts. The bartender shook a cocktail shaker in rhythm to the jazz playing overhead. Life went on, as it always does, while someone struggled quietly in the background. Vin had seen this before. People putting on brave faces while carrying impossible weights. He'd grown up watching his mother do exactly that, working multiple jobs, smiling through exhaustion, never letting him see how scared she was about making rent or putting food on the table. That kind of strength left an impression on a kid. It made him notice when others were doing the same thing. The young server shifted slightly, and Vin got a better look at her. She was probably in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun that was starting to come loose. Her restaurant uniform was spotless and pressed, the kind of attention to detail that spoke of someone who took pride in their work. But her face told a different story. Even from where he sat, he could see the redness around her eyes. The way she kept blinking rapidly like she was fighting back tears. She turned slightly away from the dining room, creating even more privacy for herself, and that's when Vin heard her words more clearly. "Mom, I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been trying everything. I picked up those extra shifts last week, and I've been working lunch service at the diner on my days off here." There was a pause as she listened to whoever was on the other end. Her mother, apparently. "No, please don't apologize," the young woman continued, and now her voice cracked slightly. "This isn't your fault. You didn't ask for any of this to happen. We're going to figure it out." Another pause. Vin watched as she squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly with the back of her hand. "The surgery is scheduled for next Tuesday," she said quietly. "Dr. Chen's office called me this afternoon. They need the deposit by Wednesday morning or they're going to have to cancel and reschedule. It's hospital policy. They can't hold the operating room without the payment guarantee." Vin felt something tighten in his chest. Surgery, deposits, cancellations. These weren't abstract problems. This was someone's real life, real crisis, happening right now just a few feet away from people enjoying expensive wine and appetizers. "I'm still short $3,000, the young woman said, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I've sold everything I can sell. I borrowed from my credit cards, but I maxed them out. I asked about a payment plan, but they said for this type of procedure they need at least 75% up front." She listened again, shaking her head even though the person on the phone couldn't see her. "No, absolutely not. We are not asking Aunt Rosa for money. She's already helped us so much and she's on a fixed income. I won't do that to her." Her tone was firm despite the tears. "I'll figure something out. I always do." But the way she said it, Vin could hear the doubt underneath. The fear, the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting too long and was running out of options. "Mom, I have to go," she said suddenly, glancing nervously toward the dining room. "My manager is going to wonder where I am, and I can't afford to lose this job. Not now. I love you. Tell Sophia I'll call her before bedtime, okay? Give her a kiss for me." Sophia. A daughter, Vin realized. This young woman was a mother herself. "I promise, I'm not giving up," she said into the phone, but her voice betrayed how close she was to breaking. "We're going to get through this, we have to." She ended the call and stood there for a moment, her phone still pressed against her chest. Her whole body seemed to sag, like she'd been holding herself up through sheer willpower, and now, in this brief private moment, she could let the facade crack just a little. Vin watched as she took several deep breaths, clearly trying to pull herself together. She set her phone down on the counter and reached for a napkin, dabbing carefully at her eyes, checking to make sure her mascara hadn't smudged. Then she straightened her apron, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and rolled her shoulders back. The transformation was remarkable and heartbreaking at the same time. Within 30 seconds, she'd gone from a woman on the verge of falling apart to someone who looked composed and ready to serve tables. She even managed to create a small smile, practicing it once before turning back toward the dining room. But Vin had seen behind the mask. He knew that smile was armor. The young woman picked up a water pitcher and headed toward a table of 4 near the windows. Vin watched as she greeted them warmly, refilled their glasses, and checked on their meals. Her voice was friendly and professional. She laughed at something one of the customers said. Nobody at that table would have any idea that just moments ago she'd been crying on the phone about a medical crisis. That took strength, real strength. Vin thought about his own journey. The years before Hollywood, when he was a struggling actor in New York, taking any job he could find. Bouncer, construction worker, telemarketer. He remembered the stress of not knowing if he'd make rent, of choosing between groceries and subway fare, of wondering if his dreams were just delusions and he should give up and get a real job. But he'd never had to worry about a child's surgery. He couldn't imagine carrying that kind of pressure. The young server moved from table to table, and Vin continued to observe her. She was good at her job, he noticed. Really good. She had a natural warmth with customers, remembered details, anticipated needs. At one table with an elderly couple, she spent an extra moment chatting with them, asking about the photos they were showing her on a phone. The old woman beamed at her, clearly delighted by the attention. At another table, she noticed a customer, struggling to flag down someone for a refill, and immediately headed over, apologizing for the wait even though it had only been a minute. She topped off the drinks and checked if they needed anything else before moving on. This wasn't someone just going through the motions. This was someone who actually cared about doing the job well, even while her personal life was falling apart. Vin's original server returned to his table, pulling him from his observations. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" she asked pleasantly. "Actually," Vin said, keeping his voice low and gesturing subtly toward the young server he'd been watching. "Can you tell me about her? She's been running around this whole section and she seems really great with customers." The server followed his gaze and smiled. "Oh, that's Elena. Yeah, she's amazing. One of our best, honestly. She's only been here about 8 months, but she's already like the heart of the front of house staff." Elena. Now he had a name to go with the face. "She works a lot?" Vin asked casually, not wanting to seem too interested but needing to know more. "Oh my gosh, yes. She picks up every shift she can. I don't think I've ever seen her turn down extra hours. She works harder than anyone here." The server leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, I don't know how she does it. I heard she works another job during the day too. She must never sleep." Vin nodded slowly, processing this information. 2 jobs, long hours. And a daughter who needed surgery. She seems really good with people, he observed. "The best," his server agreed enthusiastically. "Last week, she stayed an extra hour after her shift because this family came in late, and they were celebrating their son's graduation. She made sure they had a perfect experience even though the kitchen was about to close. And she's always helping the newer servers learn the ropes. She's just one of those people who makes everything better, you know?" Vin knew exactly what she meant. Those were the people who held communities together, who made workplaces feel less like work, who gave more than they received. "Anyway," his server said, straightening up, "what can I get for you tonight?" Vin ordered the braised short rib special that Antonio had recommended, along with a side of the roasted vegetables. He wasn't really focused on the food anymore, though. His mind was elsewhere. After his server left, Vin pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. He typed quickly, "Elena, server, daughter Sophia needs surgery, $3,000 short, deadline Wednesday." He wanted to make sure he remembered the details. Across the dining room, he watched Elena deliver a large tray of entrees to a table of 6. She distributed the plates with practiced efficiency, making sure each person got the correct order, asking if anyone needed anything else, refilling water glasses. The family barely acknowledged her beyond a quick thanks before diving into their food. Elena smiled anyway and moved on to her next table. Vin thought about all the people in the world who worked like this. Invisible to most, essential to everything. The servers and cooks, the janitors and delivery drivers, the nurses and teachers. People who showed up every day, did hard work for modest pay, and somehow still managed to smile and treat others with kindness. His mother had been one of those people. She'd worked as a housekeeper, an office cleaner, whatever she could find. She'd come home exhausted, her hands rough from chemicals and hard work. But she'd still help him with his homework and make sure he had clean clothes for school. He'd promised himself back then, when he was a kid watching her struggle, that if he ever made it big, if he ever had money and success, he'd remember where he came from. He'd remember what it felt like to be on the other side, where a $3,000 emergency wasn't an inconvenience but a catastrophe. A busboy came by to clear an empty table near Vin, and Elena followed behind him, resetting it with fresh linens and silverware. She worked quickly and precisely, making the table look perfect for the next guests. As she smoothed out the tablecloth, Vin noticed her hands were shaking slightly. She paused for just a second, pressing her palms flat against the table like she was steadying herself. Then she took a breath and continued working. How many times that night had she done that? Hidden the tremor in her hands, swallowed back the fear, pushed down the panic so she could keep working. Vin's food arrived, and Antonio had been right. The braised short rib was incredible, falling apart at the touch of a fork, rich and flavorful. But Vin barely tasted it. He ate mechanically, his attention divided between his plate and the young mother working her way through what was probably her second job of the day. A thought was forming in his mind. An idea. He wasn't sure yet exactly how he'd approach it, but he knew he couldn't just sit here, eat his dinner, and leave. Not after what he'd overheard. Not when he had the ability to help. His grandmother used to say something when he was young. She'd tell him that God puts people in your path for a reason, that sometimes you're the answer to someone else's prayer, even if you don't know it yet. Vin wasn't sure about all that, but he did believe in paying attention, in noticing when the universe was showing you something important, in acting when you had the chance to make a difference. He watched Elena laugh at something a customer said, watched her maintain that bright smile even though he knew what she was carrying inside. He thought about Sophia, a little girl who needed surgery, whose mother was working herself to exhaustion trying to make it happen. And he thought about his own daughter, how he'd move mountains for her, how he'd do anything to keep her safe and healthy. Every parent would. That's what made Elena's situation so cruel. She was doing everything right, working as hard as anyone could possibly work, and it still wasn't enough. Sometimes hard work wasn't enough. Sometimes the system was broken. Sometimes people needed help, and there was no shame in that. Vin made a decision. He didn't know exactly how he'd execute it yet, but he knew he was going to do something. He hadn't come to his restaurant tonight expecting this, hadn't planned on getting involved in anyone's personal crisis. But life didn't always go according to plan. And maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He pulled his phone out again and sent a quick text to his assistant. Need some information about one of the restaurant employees. Name is Elena. Need to know everything by tomorrow morning, discreet. The reply came back almost immediately. On it. Vin set his phone down and took another bite of his short rib. The dining room continued its evening rhythm around him. Conversations and laughter, the clink of glasses, the smooth voice of a jazz singer coming through the speakers. And in the middle of it all, a young mother named Elena kept smiling, kept serving, kept fighting. She had no idea that anything had changed, that someone had noticed. That help was coming, but it was. Vin was going to make sure of it. Vin finished his meal slowly, watching the rhythm of the restaurant flow around him. The dinner rush was still going strong, and Elena hadn't stopped moving since he'd watched her take that devastating phone call. She went from table to table with the same energy, the same warm smile, never letting anyone see the weight she was carrying. He needed more information before he could figure out the best way to help. Vin had learned over the years that good intentions without good execution could sometimes make things worse. He didn't want to embarrass Elena or make her feel like a charity case. This had to be done right. After settling his bill and leaving a generous tip, Vin made his way back toward the kitchen area. He spotted the restaurant's general manager, a guy named Robert who'd been running the place since opening day. Robert was in his late 40s, a former restaurant manager from a high-end steakhouse downtown. Vin had hired him because he was experienced, professional, and genuinely cared about both the staff and the customers. Robert was standing near the expo station, reviewing order tickets with the kitchen staff. When he glanced up and saw Vin, his eyebrows shot up in surprise. He quickly excused himself and walked over. "Boss, I didn't know you were coming in tonight," Robert said, keeping his voice low. "Is everything okay? Any problems?" "Everything's fine," Vin assured him, guiding Robert toward a quieter corner near the wine storage. "Actually, the place looks great. I wanted to come in unannounced, see how things run when I'm not expected." "You've done a good job." Robert looked relieved. "Thanks, we try to keep standards high every night. What can I do for you?" Vin glanced back toward the dining room, making sure Elena wasn't nearby. "I need to ask you about one of your servers." Elena, young woman, dark hair, been working here about 8 months. Recognition lit up Robert's face immediately. "Elena Rodriguez. Yeah, she's one of our absolute best. Is there a problem?" "Did she do something wrong?" "No, nothing like that," Vin said quickly. "Actually, the opposite. I've been watching her work tonight and she's exceptional. I just want to know more about her." "What kind of employee is she?" Robert's expression shifted from concern to enthusiasm. "Honestly, she's the kind of employee every restaurant dreams about. She's never late, never calls in sick, picks up extra shifts whenever we need help. Her customer service scores are through the roof. We do those comment cards and at least half of them mention her by name." Vin nodded, absorbing this.
"She works hard?"
"Hard doesn't even cover it," Robert said, shaking his head with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Between you and me, I actually worry about her sometimes. She works lunch shifts at another restaurant on her days off from here. And I know she's got a kid at home, a little girl. I don't know when she sleeps." "Tell me about her situation," Vin said. "What do you know about her personal life?" Robert leaned against the wall, thinking. "She doesn't talk about it much. She's pretty private, actually. But from what I've picked up over the months, she's a single mom. The father isn't in the picture, hasn't been since the kid was born. Her mother helps with childcare, but I think her mom has some health issues too. Elena mentioned once that she's supporting both of them." Vin felt his jaw tighten. Single parent, supporting her mother and daughter, working 2 jobs. That was a lot for anyone to carry, especially someone so young. "The little girl?" Vin asked carefully. "Do you know anything about her? Is she healthy?" Robert's expression darkened slightly. "Actually, that's part of why Elena works so much. Her daughter has some kind of medical condition, spine problem, I think. She's mentioned doctor appointments and physical therapy sessions. A few weeks ago, she asked if she could adjust her schedule because her daughter had to see a specialist in the morning." "Did she say anything about surgery?" "Surgery?" Robert looked surprised. "No, she never mentioned that to me. But like I said, Elena keeps things close to the vest. She doesn't like to burden people with her problems." He paused, studying Vin's face. "Why are you asking all this?" "What's going on?" Vin considered how much to share. He trusted Robert, but he also didn't want this to become gossip. "I overheard part of a phone conversation earlier. Sounds like her daughter needs surgery and she's having trouble covering the costs." Robert's face fell. "Man, that's rough. I wish she'd said something. We could have done a staff fundraiser or something. People here would help if they knew." "She seems like the type who wouldn't ask," Vin observed. "Yeah, exactly," Robert agreed. "She's proud, independent, she wants to handle everything herself." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I've tried to help in little ways. I give her the best sections, the tables that tip well. I make sure she gets the big parties and the business dinners. But she earns all of that. It's not charity. She's genuinely the best server we have." Vin appreciated that Robert was already looking out for Elena in his own way. Good managers did that, found ways to help their team without making them feel singled out. "What about the other staff?" Vin asked. "How do they treat her?" "They love her," Robert said immediately. "She's like the mom of the group, which is funny because she's younger than half of them. But she's always helping the new servers learn the system, covering shifts when someone's sick, bringing in homemade food to share. Last month, one of our servers had a rough breakup, and Elena stayed after her shift just to talk to her for an hour. That's who she is. The picture was becoming clearer. Elena wasn't just a hard worker. She was someone who took care of others even while struggling herself. Those were the people who fell through the cracks, Vin thought. The ones too busy helping everyone else to ask for help when they needed it. How's her daughter doing with all this? Vin asked. The mom working all the time? Robert shrugged. Elena doesn't complain, but I can see it wears on her. Sometimes she comes in and her eyes are red like she's been crying. She always says it's allergies or she's tired. One time I saw her on break video calling her kid, and she looked so sad when she had to hang up. But then she puts on her game face and gets back to work. Vin thought about his own kids, how much time he tried to spend with them despite his crazy filming schedule, the guilt he felt when he had to miss a recital or a game. But at least he had resources, nannies, family support. Elena was doing it all alone with no safety net. Tell me about her work ethic, Vin said. Give me specific examples, Robert thought for a moment. Okay, so last month we had this huge party, a corporate event for like 40 people. It was chaos. One of our servers called in sick at the last minute and we were short-staffed. Elena was supposed to be off that night, but when I called her in a panic, she showed up 30 minutes later. She'd been at her other job all day, but she came in anyway and helped us get through it. She stayed until almost midnight helping clean up. Did you pay her extra for that? Of course. Overtime, plus I gave her a bonus from my own pocket. But she tried to refuse it. Said she was just doing her job. Robert shook his head. Most people would have said no when I called, especially on their day off. But not Elena. What else? Vin prompted. There was this elderly couple who came in a few months ago. They're regulars now, come in every Thursday night. The first time they were here, the husband mentioned it was their anniversary, and Elena made a big deal of it. Got Antonio to send out a free dessert, had us all sing to them. The wife was crying happy tears. Now they request Elena's section every time they come. They bring her little gifts, pictures of their grandkids. She's built a real connection with them. The more Vin heard, the more impressed he became. Elena wasn't just competent. She was exceptional. The kind of employee who elevated everyone around her. Any problems with her at all? Vin asked. Anything I should know? Robert thought hard, then shook his head. Honestly? No. The only issue is that she works too much, and that's not really a problem from a management perspective. If anything, I try to make sure she takes her breaks, stays hydrated, eats something during her shift. Sometimes she gets so focused on taking care of customers that she forgets to take care of herself. That tracked with everything Vin had observed. Elena was a caretaker by nature, someone who put everyone else first. What do you pay her? Vin asked. Robert told him the hourly rate plus average tips. It was fair for the industry, maybe even slightly above average for the area. But Vin did the quick math in his head. Even with tips, even working as many hours as Elena was clearly putting in, it wouldn't be enough to cover rent, utilities, food, medical expenses, and save for a surgery deposit. Not even close. She ever mentioned financial problems? Vin asked. Never directly. But I noticed things. Her shoes are worn out, been resoled at least twice. Her work clothes are always clean and pressed, but they're the same 3 outfits rotated. She brings lunch from home every day. Never orders from the restaurant even though we give staff discounts. Little things that add up. Robert looked troubled. I probably should have checked in with her more. Sometimes I forget that just because someone's smiling doesn't mean everything's okay. Don't beat yourself up, Vin said. You've been looking out for her in the ways you could. She's lucky to have a manager who pays attention. Robert nodded, but he still looked concerned. So what are you thinking? How can we help her? I'm still working that out, Vin admitted. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep this conversation between us. Don't tell Elena I was asking about her. Don't mention to the other staff that we talked. Can you do that? Sure, of course. But why the secrecy? Because I want to help. But I need to do it in a way that doesn't embarrass her or make her feel like she's being pitied. People like Elena, they have pride. That pride is probably what keeps them going. I don't want to take that away from her. Robert studied Vin for a long moment, then smiled slightly. You know, when you first bought this place, I wasn't sure what to expect. A lot of celebrity owners just want the prestige, the tax write-off. They don't actually care about the business or the people. But you're different. You actually give a damn, Vin shrugged. My mom worked restaurants when I was growing up. I remember what it was like. She'd come home exhausted, feet hurting, smelling like fryer oil, but she never complained. She just did what she had to do to take care of me. When I see someone like Elena, I see my mom. How could I not care? They stood there for a moment in mutual understanding. Then Vin straightened up. Okay, I'm going to head out, but I'll be in touch soon. And Robert? Make sure Elena gets the best shifts this week. Not as a favor to me, but because she's earned them. Can you make that happen? Already on it, Robert assured him. She's closing tomorrow night, and we've got a private party booked. Big tips guaranteed. Good man, Vin said, clapping him on the shoulder. As Vin turned to leave, Robert called out quietly, Hey boss, whatever you're planning, I hope it works out. Elena deserves some good news. She deserves a break. She's going to get one, Vin promised. I'm going to make sure of it. He made his way back through the kitchen, giving Antonio a quick nod as he passed. The chef was too busy expediting orders to stop and chat, but he smiled and gave Vin a thumbs up. Back in the dining room, Vin spotted Elena one more time before he left. She was at a table with a family, crouching down to talk to a little boy who looked about 5 or 6. The kid was showing her something on a tablet, and Elena was genuinely interested, asking questions and making him laugh. The parents watched with appreciative smiles. When Elena stood up and moved toward the kitchen, Vin saw her wince slightly and touch her lower back. Too many hours on her feet, probably, but she rolled her shoulders, took a breath, and kept going. That was the moment Vin knew exactly what he needed to do. Not just help with the surgery costs, though that was important, but something bigger. Something that would actually change Elena's life. Give her the stability and security she was working so hard to achieve. He pulled out his phone as he walked toward the exit, dialing his assistant again. I need you to pull together some information for me, he said when she answered. Hospital billing departments, how they work, what kind of arrangements can be made. Also, I need you to research employment benefits, health insurance options, educational funds for kids, everything. And I need it by tomorrow afternoon. What's this for? His assistant asked, curious but professional. I'm going to change someone's life, Vin said simply, and I want to do it right. He stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night, the sounds of the restaurant fading behind him. His SUV was waiting at the curb right where he'd left it. As he climbed into the back seat, his driver asked, How was dinner? Vin thought about the braised short rib he'd barely tasted, about Elena's phone call, about the little girl named Sophia who needed surgery, about all the people in the world working themselves to exhaustion just to survive. Eye-opening, he finally answered. Really eye-opening? The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. But Vin's mind was already miles ahead. Planning, calculating, figuring out exactly how to help Elena without hurting her pride. It was going to require some finesse, some careful thought. But if there was one thing Vin had learned from years in Hollywood, it was how to make things happen when he set his mind to it, and his mind was definitely set on this. The next evening, Vin found himself back at the restaurant. He'd spent most of the day working with his assistant, making phone calls and putting pieces in place. But there was one crucial step he needed to take before moving forward with his plan. He needed to talk to Elena directly. He knew from Robert that she was working the closing shift tonight. The restaurant would be busy early but would wind down after 9. That's when he planned to approach her, when things were quieter and they could have a real conversation. Vin arrived around 8:30, once again wearing his hoodie and cap. This time he didn't try to hide in a corner. He sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and waited. He could see Elena working her section, moving with the same tireless energy he'd observed the night before. The bartender, a guy named Tommy who'd been with the restaurant since opening, slid Vin's wine across the polished wood surface. Back again so soon, boss? He said quietly, making sure no other customers could hear. Just checking in, Vin replied. How's the night going? Steady. We had a good dinner rush. Should quiet down in the next hour or so. Tommy wiped down the bar with practiced efficiency. You here for business or pleasure tonight? Little bit of both, Vin said, taking a sip of his wine. He watched Elena in the mirror behind the bar. She was taking an order from a couple at a corner table, her notepad out, nodding and smiling as she wrote. The couple seemed relaxed and happy, laughing at something Elena said. She had that gift, Vin noticed, of making people feel comfortable and welcome. After she finished with that table, Elena made her way toward the bar to put in a drink order. She was focused on her notepad, double-checking what she'd written, and didn't notice Vin sitting there until she was right next to him. "Tommy, I need 2 glasses of the Pinot Grigio, 1 Manhattan, and—" She glanced up and her words died mid-sentence. Her eyes went wide with recognition, even with Vin's attempt at a disguise. Oh my gosh." Vin turned to face her, offering a gentle smile. "Hey, Elena, right?" She looked completely flustered, her professional composure cracking for the first time since he'd been observing her. "Mr. Diesel, I didn't know you were here. I mean, I should have. Does Robert know you're here? Is everything okay?" The questions tumbled out in a rush. "Everything's fine," Vin assured her. "And please, just call me Vin. Mr. Diesel makes me feel like I'm in trouble." He gestured to the empty bar stool next to him. "Do you have a minute to sit?" Elena looked uncertain, glancing back at her section. I have tables. I shouldn't really. I already cleared it with Robert," Vin said. "Your section is covered for a few minutes, please. I'd like to talk to you." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. But she nodded and carefully sat down on the stool, perching on the edge like she might need to jump up and run at any moment, her hands twisted together in her lap, nervous energy radiating from her. Tommy, reading the room, quietly moved to the other end of the bar to give them privacy while he prepared Elena's drink order. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" Elena asked, her voice small. "Because if I did something wrong, I swear I didn't mean to. I always try to follow the rules and—" "Elena," Vin interrupted gently. "You're not in trouble. Not even close. Actually, it's the opposite. I wanted to tell you that you're doing an incredible job here." She blinked, surprised. Thank you. I just try to do my best." "You do more than your best," Vin said. "I've been watching the way you work, the way you treat customers, the way you help your coworkers. You're exactly the kind of person I hoped would be part of this place when I opened it." A slight blush crept up Elena's cheeks. "That's really nice of you to say. I love working here. It's a great restaurant." There was an awkward pause. Vin could see Elena's leg bouncing nervously, her eyes darting toward her section every few seconds. She was worried about her tables, about being away from her work too long. "Elena," Vin said, his voice becoming more serious, "I need to be honest with you about something. Last night I was here having dinner and I accidentally overheard part of a phone conversation you had. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard enough to understand that you're going through something difficult right now." The color drained from Elena's face. Her hands gripped the edge of the bar. "Oh God, you heard?" "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have taken that call during my shift. I know it's unprofessional, but it was my mom and I just—" "Stop," Vin said firmly but kindly. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. I'm not here to reprimand you. I'm here because I want to help." Elena's eyes filled with tears instantly, and she looked away, clearly fighting to maintain her composure. I don't need charity." "I'm handling it. I'm going to figure it out." "I know you are," Vin said. "That much is obvious. But here's the thing, Elena. Sometimes life throws us challenges that we shouldn't have to face alone. And sometimes, people who have the ability to help should step up and do it. Not because the person can't handle it themselves, but because nobody should have to carry that much weight by themselves." A tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I don't know what you heard, but I'm fine. My daughter is fine. We're going to be okay. Your daughter needs surgery," Vin said softly, "and you're working 2 jobs trying to come up with the money. You're $3,000 short and the deadline is Wednesday." Elena's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back a sob. "I shouldn't have been talking about that at work. I'm so embarrassed. I try so hard to keep my personal life separate, to not bring my problems here." "Can you tell me about your daughter?" Vin asked gently. "What's her name?" Elena took a shaky breath, trying to pull herself together. "Sophia, she's 7. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." "And she has a spinal condition?" Elena nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Scoliosis. She was born with it. It's gotten worse as she's grown. The doctors said if we don't correct it now with surgery, it could cause permanent damage. She could have trouble walking, breathing problems, chronic pain. I can't let that happen to her. I won't." The fierce maternal love in her voice reminded Vin of his own mother, of the way she'd fought for him when he was young. That same determination, that same willingness to sacrifice everything. "How long have you been trying to save for this?" he asked. 2 years, Elena admitted. Ever since the doctor said she'd need the surgery eventually. I've been putting away every penny I can. But it's never enough. There's always something. The car breaks down, or my mom needs her medications, or Sophia needs new leg braces because she's grown out of the old ones. Every time I get close, something happens and I'm back to square one. And you're doing this all by yourself? Elena nodded. Sophia's father left before she was born. When he found out about the scoliosis from the ultrasound, he said he couldn't handle it. Just walked away. My mom helps with childcare, but she's on disability. She can't work. So yeah, it's just me. Vin felt anger flash through him at the mention of the father who'd abandoned them, but he pushed it aside. That wasn't what mattered right now. What about the hospital? He asked. Have they offered any payment plans? They want 75% up front. That's hospital policy for elective surgeries. They consider this elective because it's not immediately life-threatening, even though it needs to be done. Elena's voice was bitter. I've begged them, explained the situation, but they won't budge. Without the deposit by Wednesday, they cancel the surgery and we have to reschedule. But the surgeon has a 6-month waiting list. If we lose this spot, Sophia could be waiting until next summer. And by then the curvature could get worse, Vin said, understanding the urgency. Exactly. Elena wiped her eyes again. I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like this. I try to stay strong, you know. Sophia needs me to be strong. Being strong doesn't mean you can't feel things, Vin said. It doesn't mean you have to carry everything alone. Elena looked at him directly for the first time since sitting down. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her mascara slightly smudged despite her efforts to clean it up. But there was something else there too. A glimmer of hope mixed with fear, like she was afraid to believe that this conversation might lead somewhere good. Why are you asking me all this? She whispered. What do you want to know? Vin took a breath. This was the moment. Because I want to help you, Elena. I want to pay for Sophia's surgery. Elena's reaction was immediate and visceral. She shook her head violently, standing up from the bar stool. No, I can't accept that. That's too much. I don't take handouts. It's not a handout, Vin said calmly, not moving from his seat. Sit back down, please. Elena remained standing, but she didn't walk away. She was trembling, caught between pride and desperation. Let me tell you something about myself, Vin continued. When I was growing up, we didn't have money. My mom worked 3 jobs at one point just to keep us housed and fed. I watched her struggle, watched her sacrifice, watched her go without so I could have what I needed. And you know what I promised myself? That if I ever made it, if I ever had the resources to help people like her, I would. Not because people like my mom, like you, aren't capable, but because you shouldn't have to be superhuman just to survive. Elena's lip trembled. I can't just take that kind of money from you. It's not right. Why not? Vin asked. Because you're proud? Because you want to do it yourself? I respect that, Elena. I really do. But here's what I learned. Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's knowing when to let someone else carry part of the load so you don't break under the weight. But I don't even know you, Elena protested weakly. You don't owe me anything. You're right. I don't owe you anything. But I want to do this. Not because I owe you, but because I can. Because I happen to be in the right place at the right time to hear about your situation. Because I have a daughter too, and I can't imagine watching her suffer when I had the power to help. Vin's voice was passionate now, earnest. My grandmother used to say that God puts people in your path for a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to be here.